You ever had the experience of dating somebody for maybe the first year that you met and thinking everything was absolutely incredible and you couldn't even believe that you found somebody like this? And then as time passed, maybe about a year in, coming up to 2 years perhaps in the relationship, you realize this person is constantly triggering you and absolutely driving you nuts. Well, if this is an experience you're having or have had in the past, there's a scientific reason for this. And it's actually the opposite of how a securely attached person tends to experience relationships. So, what I want to take you through in this particular video is the understanding of why this actually happens, what it's telling you, because it's actually telling you really powerful things about yourself, and then how to reverse engineer the steps that we would find in a securely attached relationship so that you don't end up feeling like a year or 2 years into a relationship, you feel exactly the opposite of what you felt in the incredible first year that you had. So, if you're new to this channel, my name is Thais. I'm the founder of the Personal Development School, and I put daily content out here on this channel all about relationships, the subconscious mind, and how to thrive in our connections with others. So, let's talk about this actual topic. And also, if you stick around to the end, I'll take you through an exercise to help you make sure that you do not end up in any kind of repeated situation like this again. So, before we get into this, there's a few important things you really need to know, and it will revolutionize the way you see relationships. The first thing that's making this huge impact on why you end up with somebody who really triggers you is that we have 6 stages of relationships. Now, this is originally derived from some of the work of Dr. Susan Johnson, where she talks about how we have different stages of relationships as a whole. But when we look at how things are really broken down, the first stage is our dating stage. In the dating stage of relationships, we are supposed to be vetting somebody, making sure that the right fit, making sure that the relationship makes sense, that they have, non-negotiables and you have non-negotiables, and those things are not causing friction to one another. Also, that if you have standards in a relationship, that person is lining up with your standards that you're looking for. And we need to make sure that we actually feel connection and chemistry and we find ourselves enjoying this person's company and wanting to spend more time with them. Now, after the dating stage, we actually go into the honeymoon stage, and it's marked by when we basically make a commitment in the dating stage to something more exclusive or to take more time to really invest in making one another a priority. And after the honeymoon stage, where we tend to see this person through rose colored glasses and everything's great, we then get into the power struggle stage. Now, there's a lot more to it than just this, but this is one of 3 major ingredients that cause us to get really triggered by somebody. In the power struggle stage, we get comfortable enough where the mask basically drops. We are not always on our best behavior. And we've been used to somebody for long enough that we actually adapt and we stop having all of these elevated neurochemicals of attraction and bonding and connection. And what happens is we basically feel more comfortable around the person. And that idea of always seeing them through the rose colored glasses actually starts to shift and change. And we begin to see a more accurate version of this person. Now, it's at this time in particular in the relationship that often people will start being more triggered than they were, of course, in the dating and honeymoon stage. But these are not the only reasons because every securely attached couple goes through this stage of relationships, but they don't find themselves being constantly and incessantly triggered by their partner. In fact, they tend to breeze through the power struggle stage way more easily than other couples. So this, once they pass out through the power struggle stage, they move into the stability stage. And this is marked by a sense of stability, deep understanding, about our knowing of one another. And then we move into the commitment and then bliss stages. And then the bliss stage is really like the honeymoon stage, but where you know the person much more deeply. You understand their fears, their flaws, you accept each other, you understand each other's patterns and triggers, and you've really built a solid framework for how to support each other and give and receive love in a way that really works for both people. But nowadays, people rarely make it to the bliss stage of relationships. So, the first thing you want to know is that we get more actually triggered in the power struggle stage. But there's 2 other really important things before we do an exercise together. The second thing, and this is arguably way more important than the first one, is that we have a subconscious comfort zone and we will invest in people who remind us of the subconscious comfort zone for how we treat ourselves. because that is what's most familiar. What do I mean by this? Well, I mean your subconscious mind, it always wants familiarity. It's very survival oriented. So whatever's familiar is safe and thus you're likely to survive. Meaning that whatever patterns you've basically been conditioned with are going to really form the relationship to yourself. I'll give you a really obvious example. Let's say you grew up in a household where there was a lot of criticism. Chances are, because those are your patterns you were exposed to repetitively, that those conditioned you to also be very critical of yourself. So guess what that zone of familiarity is going to be that you're attracted to in other people? Critical people. Now you might sit here and go, well, no, I don't like criticism. I know that I'm not attracted to critical people. This isn't everybody's experience, but you have your subconscious comfort zone in one form or another showing up. So, generally, what will happen is until you've actually broken those patterns in the relationship to yourself, your conscious mind will be like, I don't like critical people. And yet, you will find yourself constantly going back to people in relationships who are critical. And it's because your subconscious mind actually runs the show. It's actually responsible for roughly 95 to 97% of your beliefs, your thoughts, your emotions, and your decisions. And so we may know better or know we don't like this type of person, and yet find ourselves attracted to that person and investing in them time and time later. Now, the third thing that you want to know here is that when we have incompatibility in relationships, these things that trigger us about somebody else, rub us the wrong way, you know, incompatibility is not because we have two different people. It's that we have two people with differences that are unable to work through those differences, either because they can't and they don't know or understand how to, or because they literally refuse. They're not willing to invest enough in working through some of their own patterns to actually move the needle on these things that trigger us. So, in summary, before we do this exercise together here, that's really important. We want to understand we end up with people who trigger us because we won't usually find out how much they trigger us until the power struggle stage of relationships. And because the biggest triggers are people that we're choosing because they feel familiar in terms of how we treat ourselves. It becomes problematic when we have this inability or unwillingness to actually work through the triggers. And when that happens, that is likely to lead to the downfall and destruction of a relationship. So, what do we do? How can we actually change this? Well, we're going to do an exercise here together that's going to help you not only have all of these breakthroughs in terms of preventing this from happening in the future, but also in terms of understanding the powerful things that this is sharing with you. So, we're going to call this the relationship shadow exercise. And it's a really powerful exercise that will help you gain deeper insight into your relationship shadow. Now, we want to look here at this point number two. Okay. We have the subconscious comfort zone, if you remember, in terms of how we treat ourselves. So, we're going to talk about some examples. We gave the example of critical, right? We said, okay, if you're in a critical household, you may be very self critical, and that's you may be attracted to critical people. So, I want you to start by making a list. Okay. Make a list of all of the traits or behaviors that have historically really triggered you in past relationships. Okay, so I want you to think of this for a second. Now, you can either pick somebody who you were in a past relationship with that that was the biggest person that triggered you the most in your romantic relationship history, or you might notice instead that there are a few people that actually tend to share really similar traits. You might be like, yeah, I always end up and in relationships with people who are avoidant, or people who are emotionally unavailable, or people who are dismissive or critical, or people who violate my boundaries. Like, it's going to be different for each person. But I want you to think of either your pattern, or if there's one particular person who triggered you the most, what behaviors or traits triggered you there. So let's just do the example of, we talked about critical. Let's do the example of emotionally unavailable. And let's also do the example of they ignored your needs. And let's say they dismissed your feelings, okay, or your boundaries. These are some common examples that we'll see here. Now, second part of this, I'm going to take this yellow highlighter off of this because I think you see it okay. The second part of this is make a list or take inventory of all of the ways you have treated yourself this way. Okay, so what I mean by this is if we're looking at emotional unavailability, Where are you not available for your own emotional regulation or soothing? Are you constantly repressing your emotions, or maybe you're so focused on everybody else's emotions that yours always come last? Is this something that's still a part of your patterning, is what I'm asking. Now, is there a place where you constantly ignore your needs? Maybe because you're busy people pleasing others, or maybe because you feel like you don't want to be a burden to anybody or intrude. And so you ignore your own needs and you really prioritize making sure everybody else's needs are met. And what about dismissing your own feelings or your boundaries? Maybe you find yourself never really setting boundaries because you're afraid of being rejected or you're afraid of being abandoned. And so you dismiss your feelings, dismiss your boundaries as a result. Now, what hopefully you're starting to see here is you won't know that somebody's going to really show up with all of these things until you make it to the power struggle stage of relationships. When you're in the power struggle stage, these triggers are likely to come up, and they're basically going to be the biggest triggers that are the representation of how you treat the relationship to yourself. So you need to actually be in a position where you can take inventory of how you've treated yourself this way and then proceed to transform it. How do we do this? Well, we make sure that if you're emotionally available, you're looking for how can I be more emotionally available to myself? So in that case, emotional availability may look like meditation because you're really being present with your own emotions and what's happening in your body and your own thoughts. Maybe it's journaling or self work exercises, self growth. Um, and these things are going to help you gain insight into yourself. Make sure you're pivoting your behavior and you're really like emotionally putting yourself in a place where you're observing yourself, you're connecting to yourself, you're seeing what your patterns are, you're working to support yourself emotionally in changing patterns that may not be serving you. Okay. Your next one could be if you've ignored your needs. Okay. Well, what's the opposite of ignoring your needs? Share my needs with others, meet my own needs more regularly. Now, you want to get specific as to what your needs actually are, but basically, what we're doing is we're going to do the opposite of what's existing here, the things that triggered us in other people. Now, the really powerful part that takes place here is that by changing this, what we're actually changing is the relationship we have to ourselves. And thus, we are reprogramming our subconscious comfort zone. And by reprogramming our subconscious comfort zone, or reconditioning it, because through repetition over time, we fire and wire new neural pathways to create and reinforce new patterns based on these ways we're going to transform our needs. We shift this. We are no longer going to be as attracted to people who do these things in this part of the exercise that triggered us to begin with, like ignore your needs or violate your boundaries. And as a result of all of that, we are going to have a much easier time in the power struggle stage of a relationship. And we talked about those different stages. Why? Because we won't have this subconscious comfort zone self with all of these wounds where we wound ourselves, we don't treat ourselves in a really healthy way, and then we're attracted to that in other people. Instead, we'll have a more secure relationship to self. And that will allow us to be attracted to more secure and available people. And thus, we will invest in the right relationships and have an easier time in the power struggle stage, which will prevent the devastation and downfall of your romantic relationship. If you want to do a deeper dive into some of this work, this is actually called shadow work. And I have a whole course on this with all relationships you can check out fully for free, just for a limited time. I will put the link to that down below, and I'm excited for you to check it out. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for stopping by, for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to this community. I put daily content out here all the time on different attachment styles, different themes and patterns and exercises we can do to really improve the quality of our personal lives and relationships. And would love to have you here as a part of the community. So grateful you stopped by, and thank you for watching.